Hi, everybody. I want to thank you for being a part of this webinar today. SEO is something that I get very excited about, and I'm excited to share it with all of you. Um, when I talk about high-level SEO, what it means to me is something outside of the bare minimum. So I have it tiered into 3 different sections, and essentially it's a process. Many people think SEO is something you do once, but it is something that you have to do for the entirety of the time you plan on having a website. SEO is incredibly important, but it takes time. The average time that it takes to see any sort of change or result from SEO changes and SEO work is 6 months to a year. The age of many of the top 3, I believe it is, results, organic search results in Google, the average age is 3 to 5 years. So this is something that you have to start working on now, and the sooner you do it, the better. So, oh, I see that there's something in the chat already. We're talking about businesses. So, what is SEO? Stands for search engine optimization, and all it means is making friendly websites for people and for search engines. Some people say it's one or the other. It really is about both. There are 2 aspects to SEO: on page, which are items that your website has that impact SEO, or off page, items on other websites that impact SEO. Obviously, you have full control of your on-page SEO. However, off-page, you can still have some control, but not entire control. If somebody else links to your page that you don't necessarily want traffic coming from there, you can disavow that link, but you can't control it and stop it from existing. Oh, it doesn't like me using that button. So 93% of online experiences start with a search. That means only 7% are referred through clicks or referred through somebody directly typing in a URL. 70 to 80% of users ignore paid search results. That being said, this data is from before Google's most recent update, where, as you can see, there's a lot of paid spots for products. And so that wasn't included in these results. I just want to be, full disclosure. Search engine leads average a 14.6% close rate, as opposed to outbound leads like cold calling, direct mail, etc. They have an average of 1.7%. 40% of revenue, so not just search, which doesn't necessarily lead to a sale, but 40% of revenue is captured by organic traffic. 50% of visitors are more likely to click if a brand appears multiple times. So if you search for a term and you see that brand mentioned multiple times on the front page, they're going to be more likely to click because you essentially own that market. So what is this beautiful chapeau that we have here? You might have heard the term black hat SEO or white hat SEO. There's also a gray hat SEO. What these terms mean are search engines like Google. I'm going to just say Google when I mean search engine, even though there are other engines that are important and are very frequently used. When we say Google, we mean search. So I'm just going to say Google interchangeably with search engines. They create an outline of etiquette, essentially, for what they will allow and not allow. There are some things that are technically allowed but break the spirit of the rule, and there are some things that are not allowed at all. And there are things that they say, please do these things. So the things that are not allowed at all are called black hat. They are things that will get you banned from Google. So if you search your company name, you will not come up because Google is essentially forbidding your site from being listed. You're blacklisted. White hat are things that they actively ask you to do. And gray hat are things that, like I said, they don't technically break the rules, but they break the spirit of the rules. A lot of things that used to be really popular are that a lot of companies still employ today are black hat. You might have seen companies that offer to create pages of content for you, and they're stuffed with keywords. You'll tell them 3 areas that you want to rank for, and they basically create multiple pages on separate websites that have those keywords spammed and linking back to your site. Another thing that people do is they make text that's the same color as the background that you don't necessarily want to see. And those are all things that if Google catches you, they can take you off of Google forever, which is problematic. So all of these tactics that we're going to talk about today are white hat tactics that Google expressly says, please do this. So stage 1, best practices. These are things that all websites should do so that they aren't actively harming themselves. It's a stage 1. Some people stay in this for a couple months. Some people stay in this for years. It all depends on your goals and the size of your website. So the goals for stage 1, we want to achieve, oops, we went too far. We want to achieve a baseline for measuring. We want to ensure educated users, so people who know what they're looking for can find the site. We want to establish an SEO foundation for growth. We can't measure things if we don't know where we're starting from. So we have to start from somewhere. We want to remove all SEO penalties, things that are actively harming us. And we want to understand what our core keywords are. Usually what I say when you're developing your core keywords is you want to talk about the name of your product or service for people who are educated, they know what they're looking for. You can also talk about a pain point or a feature and a location, if that's important, or a target market. So for example, if you make a product that stops dogs from barking without bothering your neighbors, you might use keywords like dog won't shut up. And your target market might be my neighbor's dog won't shut up, something like that. Because keep in mind that when you're doing keywords, you want to utilize things the way that people type, the way that they search. They no longer just search with very static keywords. They basically have a conversation with the search engines. And so that's something to consider. Heading tags. Heading tags are essentially you telling the search engine the ranking of how important your content is. So they are tiered H1, H2, H3, H4, all the way down to H6. Usually H1 is almost always your page title. Then you have H2 through 6, which can be subtitles, lists, callouts. The general rule of thumb is each number, that's how many in a page you get. Not always, but it's so you know if you're overusing them. For example, if you use an H1 tag, there really should only be one. You do get penalized if you have multiple H1 tags. You're essentially telling the search engine, this is the most important thing on my page. If you come away with nothing else, I want you to know that this is important. And heading tags are not a design element. Lots of times when people are building websites, they say, oh, I want this to be in large text, so I'm going to pick this H1 because that makes it large and bold. You're essentially telling the entire world that the most important thing on your website are the words sale, exclamation point. We don't know what the sale is on. We don't know what it's for, but we know that there's sale. So you have to keep all of that in mind. Your meta description is this text right here. This is when you make a search on Google, I think it's 146 characters you get to describe what it is. Now, search engines will automatically pull the first bit of content if you don't specifically write a meta description. But the problem with that is you're not having full control. People are going to want to know in a glance if your content is the right content that they're looking for. And the best way to do that is to customize your meta description. Internal linking is linking to pages of your website within your website. I'm sure you've seen this on other websites. If you go to a home page, they might say, check out our clearance section, and there's a link to the clearance page. or showcasing a particular employee, and then you click on that and you're taken to the employee page. That's all internal linking. And we do this for multiple reasons. One, it's user friendly. It allows users to follow a train of thought throughout the website. So for example, if I saw something about floor safety, and let's say somebody has no idea what floor safety is or why it's important. You could have a button or a page for them to go to from the home page, and then they follow and they learn more, and then at the end they can book an appointment. It also establishes a hierarchy. It allows browsers to access all your pages in a thoughtful way. If you just have all of your pages and say that they're all equally as important, then it's not going to follow correctly because they're not all equally important. You have main pages, and then you have pages that branch and spider web off of those. And so setting up internal linking helps establish that hierarchy. It also shares link equity. And what link equity is let's say you have one page that is performing incredibly well. You got linked to on a newspaper article, or somebody talked about you on Facebook, and all of these people are following through this one page. If you use that page and link to other pages, they get some of that traffic, and that will help boost their SEO. Another thing to consider are alt tags. I don't know why that's not going away. An alt tag is code on the back of an image. Now, you won't necessarily see this, but this is a description of what it looks like on the back end in the code of the website. The alt is the description of the image, and what that is essential for is, one, search engines can't read images. They're working on it, but they cannot do it currently. They need a descriptor to tell them what is in the image. Also, for sight impaired people, the alt tag is what their special software reads, so they know what an image is. It is very important that you don't just keyword stuff in these. Keyword stuffing is just taking all the keywords you can think of and just cramming them in one space in a nonsensical fashion. One, you will get punished for it, but two, it's completely unusable for the people who need it. Instead, describe what's in the image, and then afterwards you can do a pipe. A pipe is that vertical line that's above the enter key on your keyboard. You can do a pipe and then describe your business, your location, the keywords of the product or service, but ensure that the very first thing is always a description of what's in the image. Ensure that you have your local SEO set up. For most businesses, at the bare minimum, that means setting up a Google My Business page. There is no excuse not to do it. It's free. It's usually the very first interaction that people have with your business. It's front and center. It is vital that you do it. There's a whole bunch of other things that come into local SEO, and we can talk about it in a minute. But above all else, part of best practices is ensuring that you have your Google My Business and local SEO set up. Another important thing is ensuring that your site is mobile friendly. Now, a lot of online companies or website development companies will tell you that they either will make an app for your website or they will ensure that your website is mobile friendly, but they don't tell you what's happening on the back end to do it. And I'm going to explain it. Essentially, there are two ways for a website to give you a mobile website. One is it reads the OS or the operating system that's accessing the website. So if you go to a website on your computer, it will say, oh, this device is accessing me with Windows 8. So I'm going to give it the desktop version. If you accessed it with your phone, the website would say, oh, this device is accessing me with iOS 11. I'm going to give them the mobile version. And it used to work that way. But the problem is now we have so many different smart devices. Your refrigerator can access a website. there's no way to be able to hard code in every single operating system to a website. And on top of that, even if you did manage it, that all increases load time, which makes your site speed much slower, which hurts your SEO. So what you need to do is you need to do what they call a responsive website, which means instead of trying to look for the operating system, it looks at the screen size. So no matter how you're accessing it, it knows, okay, for a screen this size, I need to give it this version of the website. For a screen this size, I need to give it that version. And it's great because it ensures that no matter how you're accessing it, if it's through your fridge or, your stove or your microwave or your tablet or your phone, or you switch phones. It's another thing. There are some people who are keeping older versions of operating systems and websites. When you hard code the OS, if you're not constantly updating them, you could lose those people and they can get a very broken version of your website. The sample that I have here is an example of how a website looks on an iPhone because it's coded for OS versus how it looks on a different device that doesn't have a recognized operating system. It's trying to give the desktop version of the site and not rearrange any of the elements because it doesn't see it based on the screen size and it doesn't recognize any of the operating systems. So another thing that's very important is schema. And I know schema is a term that's used across a lot of different industries. And in this industry, schema is a markup vocabulary added to HTML, which is the language that we use to code websites, to improve how search engines read and represent your page. If you look at a search engine like Google and you see how different content is displayed differently, that's because of schema. So when you see a list of products at the top, that's because those products were put up there coded with schema. When you see theater listings, schema, nonprofits, local businesses, all of those are a special language that utilizes schema to say, hey, this is a special kind of content. I want you to display this differently. Oh, recipes is another really good one. Say this is a very particular kind of category. I want you to display it thusly. So it showcases reviews, menus, articles, multiple in-browser actions, like when we talk about buying theater tickets, departmental information, images, location, hours, all optimized for display on a SERP, which is a search engine results page. Basically, after you search, it's the page that gives you all the information. And I also want to ensure that you all know at the very end of this presentation, there is a page of resources. And on that page of resources are 2 schema related links. One is a schema generator and another one is a schema checker. So it essentially shows you how Google views your schema. Another term that people use somewhat interchangeably with schema is rich text markup. It's not technically the same, but they share a lot of the same fundamentals. For the average business owner, just knowing schema and utilizing schema is all you really need to know. So as I said, it's incredibly important that your site loads quickly. A bounce rate, which is the time, a bounce is when somebody leaves your website in a short amount of time. So a bounce rate increases by 50% if your website takes 2 seconds extra to load. So if your page is on average going to have 2 people leave, if it takes over 2 seconds, it's going to be an extra person. And that number increases exponentially the longer it takes for your site to load. Conversions, which is somebody performing an action that you want them to do, be it buy a product, sign up for a quote, sign up for an email newsletter, they fall by 12% for every extra second it takes your website to load. And while this might not seem like much, when you consider the average website takes over 8.5 seconds, all of a sudden that 12% is almost 100%. So you have to consider that when you're looking at really big images or animated GIFs or videos, things that are hosted on your website that add to your load time, you have to find ways to cut that down. And I skipped, but 53% of users leave if a page load is longer than 3 seconds. So it's really important to ensure that your images, you're not using enormous images that will increase your load time, that you aren't using background images unless you have to. Use color instead where you can, or use small images and have them pattern. There's a bunch of different ways to cut down on your site speed, or increase your site speed and decrease your load times. Again, in the resources, I have, different tools for checking your site speed that give you tips on decreasing them, decreasing the amount of time it takes to load. So that's all the baseline stage 1 stuff for best practices. We're now into stage 2, which is growth. What are the goals for stage 2? We want to increase visitor inclusivity. So before we were talking about people who are educated, who knew what they were looking for, and now we're going to increase to maybe people who aren't aware. We're going to utilize SEO elements that are more time consuming than this stuff. The things that I've given you up to this point have been relatively simple to initiate, and they don't take a lot of time. And we're going to focus on overall client specific goals. So we're going to talk about citations versus aggregators. What's a citation? A citation is an offsite mention of the name, address, and phone number. It's referred to as a NAP of a local business. An example can include local and industry-specific directories and associations. Facebook, having a Facebook page with your name, address, and phone number is a citation. Yellow page listings are citations. The most important thing with citations is they all have to be the exact same. So like if your business is Fred's TVs, you can't have Fred's TVs on one place and another one have Fred's TVs LLC. You can't have a post office box at one and your physical address at another. Your phone numbers have to be the same. Your URLs have to be the same. Everything has to be the same, because consider it, they're all drops in a bucket, right? And if the drops are different, they go in different buckets. It's not as impactful. It's not going to help your SEO as much. Now, I'm a huge fan of utilizing local and industry specific directories for citations, mainly because you're getting a link back from an authoritative site. So for example, if you're in a physical therapy field and you are getting listed in a physical therapy directory, search engines see, hey, this is coming from a site that ranks highly for physical therapy. This also is about physical therapy. We're going to give it a boost. It's the same thing locally. If you are in Kansas City and you're getting listed in a Kansas City directory, you're getting that extra boost for local results. That being said, there are a lot of places to have citations listed. There is a link in the resources that gives a full list for 2020 or 2021, excuse me. I believe it is over 200. Doing this all by hand would not be an enjoyable way to spend your time, which is what brings us to our next subject, aggregators. An aggregator is a site that creates automated submissions and mass NAP updates for a large amount of citations on general listing sites and social media. So what an aggregator will do is you update all your information in one place and it will automatically send it out to a large number of citation sites. The thing with aggregators is when I do these presentations, I try to only bring free tools. To my knowledge, there are no aggregators that are free. Some of them are very reasonably priced. You have sites like Yext or Bright Local, or there are other independent aggregators. Yext is the biggest one. But if you want to ensure that your NAP is being sent out to as many places as possible, you might want to consider an aggregator. But I won't link to them because they do not have a free option. Images part 2. So in addition to your alt tags, we want to have descriptions. The more detailed you are, the better. You can also geotag. So I'm sure you've seen on Facebook or Instagram where you can see where a photo was taken. It even shows up in your photos on your phone. You might have little albums that tell you where individual photos were taken. And that information is stored in a very special part of a photo file called the EXIF data. And you can manually update photos that don't have that information in the EXIF data and give it that information. So for example, if you are a roofing company and you're taking pictures of roofs, before and afters, you can load them into your computer, open a program. They have multiple free programs for editing EXIF data. You can put the location, the zip code, the city and state, what have you, and use those images on your website. And the SEO bots or spiders that go through information and decide what to list where, they will see that information and they'll say, hey, this is geotagged to this location. This means that it has a very close connection with this location. So if people are searching for this location, we're going to ensure that it ranks highly because it's obviously taken there. So that's what geotagging is, and that's how to utilize it for your search results. SEO and accessibility. Accessibility comes into many factors with our world being so connected. It's very difficult to live without the internet, and we need to ensure that no one is being alienated because of it. There are moves to have websites covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and there are also some things that are happening overseas where companies of a certain size are being penalized if they don't ensure accessibility. There are companies that will give you a plugin and do everything for you. But I think it's important to understand the reasoning behind accessibility. So you're going to want to ensure that your site works with voice search, not only for people who are vision impaired, but also home assistants, things like Alex. I don't want to say the whole name in case any of you have one. She goes off. Google also has a product, any sort of voice activated home assistant that a lot of elderly people actually use for information and to purchase products are done through voice search. Color blindness. There are different types of color blindness, and there are some things I've worked with companies who couldn't figure out why their product wasn't selling. They're colorblind glasses, and the buy button was the same color as the background. So nobody saw it because they had a particular type of color blindness that couldn't differentiate between those two colors. So you have to ensure that they're always discernible. I have a link in the resources that if you run your website through it, it will show you what it looks like to people with different types of color blindness. With your navigation, your menu and your layout should be intuitive. It should make sense. If people are frustrated, they will leave. If people have a hard time understanding, or if they hover over something, it keeps flickering and going away, that's problematic and that needs to be addressed. People who have mobility issues might not be able to click in the microsecond that it takes, or they might be using special tools, and you have to ensure that those are easily used. You want to use descriptive link text. So when you have a link, the actual text, it's called the anchor text. So instead of it saying click here, learn more, you would want it to say click here to sign up for an account, something like that. You want your buttons to do the same thing, because again, keep in mind, if you have somebody who is vision impaired and they're using a special tool, all they see is click here, click here, click here, click here. When they're trying to navigate between links, they don't know what's what, and you need to ensure that they understand it. Media controls, auto advancing elements require controls. If you have a slideshow, ensure that people can move back and forth between the slideshow. Media transcription, having closed captioning for videos, transcriptions for graphics. If you have an infographic, a lot of people like sharing infographics for information. You want to ensure that somebody who's visually impaired can still get that information. You don't just want them to see a big block of nothingness, which is what they would see if you don't provide them with a transcription. Breakout content, you don't want a wall of text. Use bullets, images, and numbering to break it up. You can also break it up into different sections with different colored backgrounds. Don't fake elements. Overwrought CSS, which is the way that people use styling, can make a site unusable. So I'm not going to delve too much into that. Just be upfront with your site. Don't try to trick anybody. That's what we're gonna stick with there. So at this point, you've done stage 1, you've done stage 2 for your growth. Now we're into stage 3, maintenance. This is the stuff that you do like 3 to 4 years down the line when all of your other stuff is done and it's working for you, and you want to get to a consistent place. And this is the stuff that you're just going to constantly be doing forever. Stage 3 goals, page specific optimization. We aren't just painting every single page with the same brush of keywords. We are going to do very specific things on each page depending on what our goals are. We want to continue monitoring all of our SEO impacts. This is where you see people changing the headline of a page and seeing if that does anything. We want to do targeted content creation. And we're going to ensure that reporting becomes a vital aspect of performance. In the first 2 stages, because we were building things, because we were starting from scratch, reporting didn't really factor in because you couldn't really get any good data because you didn't really know where you were starting from. We were making too many changes. At this point, we have a decent baseline. We have enough time going on that we need reports to tell us what's succeeding and what's failing. So we're going to talk about page-specific strategy. What that means is every single page on your website has a purpose and you need to have a strategy behind it. How is somebody going to come to this page? Why are they coming to this page? Why are they coming to this page now? Are they coming from Facebook? Are they coming from a news article? Are they coming from referrals? Landing pages are very helpful in utilizing page-specific strategy. We'll get to landing pages in a little bit, but essentially you need to be able to look at each page of your website and have a plan for it. Now, sometimes if you, for example, sell products, that's pretty easy. You understand how you want that product to be sold. You understand that you want a specialized schema for that product, that you want any sort of plan for SEO. There are certain things you want to highlight about that product because even though it's a product, it's still a page. It's still its own page in your entire website hierarchy. So you want to have a specific strategy for that. But keep in mind, it's not just about the products. It's also about the category, the parent category of all of those products. How are you going to address that? How does your advertising come into play? Are we sending people directly to categories or to products? And even if you have a service business, that's important as well. If we're talking about having people sign up or be educated, those are very different needs that have to be considered when you're building a strategy. On-page keyword research. So before we were talking about having just those general pain points, features, target market area. Now we're going to do very specific per page, on page keyword research. There are a plethora of places to get information on keyword research. It really should be a workshop in and of itself. That being said, I am going to break it down into 4 areas. 1, priorities. What are the goals for that page? To educate, establish authority, or convert. How or why would a visitor reach it? Where do we want them to go next? Look at your competitors. What are competitors ranking for? What's performing well and what are they missing out on? We can avoid something oversaturated and move into untapped potential. look at what your existing current content is ranking for. See if the existing strategy is bearing fruit or needs to be scrapped or additional pages are needed to supplement. Lots of times you might have too much general content for a page, and you might want to do a parent page with underlying pages. For example, if you're talking about why your mattress is amazing, you might not want one page talking about your amazing mattress. You might want a parent page and then separate pages where you can talk about the support. Another page where you talk about the cooling factors, because you have all of this data and charts and videos and reviews that you want to specify that one particular problem. And the benefit of that is when people search for those particular features, they get those individual pages, which then feed back to the parent page. Suggested keywords. Using a software, we can target similar words or phrases that may be underutilized with little competition. I have a couple of places linked at the back of the document, but there's plenty of different options if you're looking for keyword research. Again, this is a long-term thing. This isn't something that many people who are starting out are going to get involved in, because keyword research is a very, very deep topic. But if you're at this point, the high level SEO point, I think it's important that you know what to look forward to and work towards as you maintain your site in the future. Article propagation, which is a fancy way of saying getting your name out there on other websites. You can be quoted in local sites, industry sites, general sites, press releases, by influencers or other social accounts. It all depends on what you do. You all know your industry is far better than I ever will. And so you know the websites that people go to, the news sources that people go to, the social media accounts that people in your industry flock towards. If you can reach out to them, that would be hugely beneficial. Also at the end, in resources, I have 2 links for article propagation. One is Medium, which is essentially you can write an article on anything that you want and put it up there and others can read it. And because it's not on your site, it's an off-page link. Another one is HARO, or Help a Reporter Out. And what you can do there is sign up to become a source for reporters who are looking for quotes or information for articles. I think that there's a paid version of it where you get access to things quicker, but if you are going for a very niche sort of article, I really don't think that you need to pay. You can utilize the free option. Landing pages. So what is a landing page? It has one goal. It's focused on conversions. I'm putting my fingers up like you can see it. It's about limiting distractions. There's no navigation on it, and it's extremely targeted. You can have multiple landing pages for one product or one service. Landing pages are often used for an event, a sale, for a sign up, a reference, to do pre-orders, or a webinar like this one. You can do a landing page for a particular person or to create awareness. There's so many different opportunities for landing pages. I'm a huge fan of them, not only for conversion purposes, but also for tracking purposes, because with the privacy protections that are coming up, which I think are really good, and there's something that we need, being able to just see that a page is being accessed, not necessarily where from or by whom, but just that it's getting traffic, is a great way to circumvent some of the roadblocks that come up through more traditional tracking and analytics. Another thing you might want to consider where you're at this higher tier is device-specific experience. We are all in different modes mentally and goal-wise when we are on our phones versus our computers. If you're looking at a restaurant on your phone, it's probably because you want to order something. So a restaurant should ensure that if somebody's accessing their website from their phone, that ordering is quick, easy, and upfront. If you have a service business, if say you're a plumber, you want to ensure if somebody's calling, looking you up on their phone, it's not because they're researching for sprinklers. It's because they have an emergency and they need to get a hold of somebody really quickly. So understanding your target market and how they interact with your business and when is vital to being able to give them something that's useful when they need it. And one of the ways you can do that is with a device specific experience. So somebody on a tablet has a different experience than somebody on a phone or a laptop or your Apple Watch. Another thing to consider is specialized content. Not content, when people think of it, they think of website pages or blogs. And it's not just blogs. Specialized content leads to higher conversions and higher engagement. So what does specialized content look like? It can be a video. Videos see an average 157% increase in organic traffic from search engines and increased time spent on websites by 105%. Infographics, people exposed to infographics retain 65% of that information 3 days later, compared to 10% with information only. So by utilizing an infographic, you can help people remember your brand later and they retain more information. Listicles, 10 best ways to prep your house for winter, that sort of thing. Those are considered listicles. It's a superior way to break complex topics into digestible, shareable chunks that are saturated with keywords. Basically, every single quiz, like online media quiz sort of thing, will have listicles, but businesses use them and they're incredibly helpful for people who are looking for solutions, which also help establish your authority and expertise, which doesn't not only helps in SEO, but also helps just, oh, this company gives me all of this information that I need all the time when I wasn't even a customer. If I know of somebody who has a problem that can be solved by this company, of course, I'm going to refer them. Another thing that you can do is interviews. Either you can do them by recording them or doing an on-page transcript, kind of like a news or entertainment article would do. It establishes your site authority and expertise, and it allows users to better understand their challenges and needs. It also allows you a lot of opportunities for link backs, which are really beneficial. You can do case studies to help in understanding how a site or business helps the end user by seeing it applied to others. Checklists, getting ready. There's the 10 easy ways for fall. Here's a checklist for what to do in winter preparations. So here's your checklist for November. Here's your checklist for December, etc. It's actionable. It's easy to create content that builds trust and establishes expertise in the part of business. Again, podcasts establish authority while creating brand awareness and community. It's an on-demand format and it's geared towards loyal, higher income consumers, which is something to consider. Again, know what your target market is. Ebooks or white papers, 83% of decision makers surveyed said that there's so many typos in this. White papers were moderately to extremely influential in their final decisions. This comes to the type of product or service that you're offering, and again, your target market. If it's something that they need to do a lot of research for, that they need to see comparisons, that there's a lot of detailed information that they want to have all at once, then an ebook or a white paper is a fantastic way to deliver that. Another important thing when we're talking about knowing your target audience is your content readability. Of course, I attached this tool in the resources page, but this reads through content and tells you how readable it is. It tells you how many words of certain sizes, if you're talking down or talking up to someone. It allows you to see how your words are being translated to the end user. If you have somebody who doesn't know anything about your good or service and you're using a whole lot of industry terms, that's going to be alienating and they're not going to follow through. So a tool like this is really beneficial to understanding where somebody might be coming from. It's the epitome of high-level targeted content creation. Again, this is not something, if you're just starting your SEO journey, you should not be looking into this. But if you've been doing it for a while and you want to really do the peak high-level SEO stuff, this is what you need to do. And last is probably the easiest thing to do, but emphasize content. So in a website, italicized or bold words have impact. Search engines consider them when looking at content and saying, oh, this word is important. This word is being emphasized. They use that. Now, is that something you should do right when you're starting your content? No, it's just that extra little boost when you're refining and streamlining everything as you go. We don't underline because when we underline, it looks like a hyperlink. And it confuses people. And I'm sure that all of you have had some instance where you see something that's underlined, you try to click on it, and you realize it's not a link. It's just somebody underlined something, and that makes you mad. So on that super groundbreaking revelation, are there any questions?
Yeah, there's nothing in the chat right at the moment, but let me suggest about opening up the microphones or allowing our attendees to open up their microphones. I'll go ahead and do that right now. And it will take me a second here to go down the list of attendees. And anybody that wants to go ahead and talk on the microphone, points that you found are important in the presentation or questions that you had. I have allowed all of our attendees to open up their microphones at this time. So please go ahead and question our presenter. I think you're getting some good pats on the back there, Ange, in chat. Robert's looking for the resource page.
It's the last. These are all just hyperlinks. When you get the PDF of the presentation, it will be the last page in the presentation. So all of these will be hyperlinks that you will work. You could just click on them and it'll take you to the site that you need to go to.
And you mentioned about keyword research being the possibly the topic of an entire workshop presentation.
Oh, you know me, Ted. I think that every workshop I give should be 17 different workshops. So.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody want to open up their mic to say hello to Ange?
Hi, Ange, it's Michael. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Ange?
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I just wanted to jump in and say, you know, I really enjoyed this presentation. Very, very detailed. So I do have one question. I've been working on my website for about 5 years. I'm at a point now where I have a pretty niched down list of people that I contact pretty much weekly. And that's through updates with a newsletter. I link to my blog posts and things like that. So my business is primarily online interior design. I'm struggling with this concept of when I work with my clients, I send them a PDF. It has a lot of different links in it, and people are constantly losing the email. So what I would like to do is to create a member space on my actual website. My concern is that when I go and do very specific things for people on my website, it would be kind of like a username password situation through like a customer portal type of a thing. Is that going to affect my website ranking, and does that influence my keywords, and does that influence all of my search engine rankings and all of that stuff too? If it's privatized, I guess, is the question.
Well, I apologize. My dog wants to partake. There's two ways around that. One, and it's a catch-22, really.
Mhm.
You can either get the SEO benefits by having that content be listed.
Okay.
But the problem is unless you do more work on the back end to hide it, people will be able to pull that. There are lots of instances where companies will charge for a PDF or a white paper, or they'll only want you to get access to it with an email, but then they host it on their site. So then if you just do file type searches in Google with the document name, you'll get it for free, and you'll get it without having to give over your email. So you can do it without being penalized, but you run the risk of people still being able to get that content.
Okay.
And it's not something that you really necessarily have to be super worried about. It's not like
Mhm.
people are going to hack you or anything.
Right.
It's how much effort somebody's going to put in for it. And if somebody's willing to put in that much effort to look for it, then it means that what you're doing is really important and really good, which in my mind anyway is a benefit. And it's something to be proud of.
True. Yeah. So I guess my client's information is not really going to be very private. I mean, the stuff that I'm doing is basically giving them like digital floor plans and things like that. So it's not going to be anything that's going to be of use to somebody that doesn't have their room, I guess you could say. My fear, I guess, was just that if I had all of these pages that weren't listed, I guess, in my regular listings of things, if the keywords would be, if I would be penalized, I guess, in a way that
You definitely won't be penalized.
Okay,
So
okay.
essentially what you're looking at, I'm saying essentially a lot today, it's my word of the day. What you're looking at is telling Google, please look at this list versus I would rather you not look at this.
Okay.
Google's going to do what it wants to do. Even if you say, I don't want you to troll this, it could still do it. But that content, that PDF, they have access to it, even if it's behind a paywall, essentially. So you don't have to worry about that being lost. It's not going to actively penalize you for that. No.
Great. Perfect. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. I see there's a question from Robert Dunphy. How do you know when an algorithm like Google is changed, and how do you know how to make changes that will max its use? So Google usually sends out, if what I usually do is I set up a Google alert for Google search engine changes. They also have a developer page where it will tell you any sorts of sites, any sort of changes that are upcoming. And what I do is I wait for other people to mess with it to tell me what's going to matter, what's not going to matter. There are, if you search, you can find different search engine experts that will tell you about the different updates and what I think, they all have weird names. So like Google Panda or Penguin or what have you. They're all updates that somebody else is going to mess with. And the reason that I say that you can't really concern yourself about it too much is, one, it's a waterfall effect. So nobody is going to just flip it on immediately. Nobody's going to be able to, access it and make all the changes that need to be changed. And two, Google usually doesn't tell you exactly what they changed. There are many reasons for that. Mainly, they don't want people to game the system. But what you have these experts doing is they will make 50 identical pages, and each of them will have one thing different. And then they'll see how they perform. And that's how we know what changes. It's a very ineffective model. It's very large and it's very messy. But because algorithms don't share how they work, because why would they? because that's what makes them their money. That's their secret sauce. That's how people find out what works and what doesn't work. Everything in this presentation, with the exception of the things that Google actively tells you to do, like site speed and schema and things like that, they were all found out by people who just put a bunch of stuff out there and saw what stuck. So the best way to do it is to find somebody whose information you trust. There are a bunch, but it changes constantly. And see what the changes are. So what I would do is I would set up a Google alert for Google algorithm update, and then just see what comes up. You might just get a whole bunch of emails of nothing, or you might get some information that's really helpful. The good part about it is there's definitely a curve for being able to utilize that information. Because nobody knows what's in the algorithm, it actually creates a pretty even playing field. Nobody has special access to get ahead of changes. You just find out when they happen. You see a big, huge drop. Lots of times if you have Google Analytics, they'll have a little pin drop that will say, hey, we changed the algorithm on this day. You might see some changes in your search traffic because of it. So they'll tell you what those changes are. And if you see anything that's problematic, you're like, oh, I need to look this up and I need to address it. And I need to see what other people are doing. I wish that I had a cut and dry answer for you. I understand that I'm rambling. And the reason is I want to be able to help people and give them the answers that they're looking for. And with this particular question, there is no black and white answer. We're all just kind of treading water at the whims of Google. And when they make a change, we try and figure out what it is and work together and address those changes. Yeah, I hope that helped at least a little bit.
And there's a question, I think, before Robert's. Well, Robert had one even before the one that you answered. With a slideshow, is there a means to go fast and even skip some of the slides?
Are you talking about on Zoom or in general? Because we are, like I said, sending out a PDF with every single slide on it, so you can skip through those as much as you'd like to.
I think what he was referring to was in specialized content on your website. So with a slideshow, is there a means to go fast, even skip slides?
Yes. So depending on what you're utilizing for your slide software, there's, you could be using a script, a plugin. There's a whole different world of things that you could be using. You can usually there's buttons on the sides, or you'll see little dots on the bottom, or thumbnails. So people can utilize those. Usually if they're thumbnails, they don't call it a slideshow, they call it a carousel. But people can use those and then click on those different buttons to skip. So usually your first slide is tied to the first dot and your second slide to the second dot. So if somebody skips to the fourth dot, they're going to see the fourth slide. Or you can use the arrows to go back and forth through them really quickly. The important thing to remember with those is you want to ensure that they are sizable for mobile, that they're flexible and that they scale for mobile, and that they are touch adaptive, because most of them are now, but some legacy scripts are not touch enabled, so you can't utilize them on a phone. But you can definitely, most slideshows have the ability to have tools where you can skip or fast forward through slides.
Okay. I'm not seeing anything else in the chat, and I don't see any hands raised otherwise. Anyone else with a question or comment? Well, okay. That being the case, let me just say thank you to Ange for the presentation and preparing all the slides. We really appreciate your being here and giving us the benefit of your knowledge and experience. Want to thank the attendees for spending their time with us tonight. Please recall there are a listing of future workshops, webinars on the buffaloniagara.score.org website, which you can take advantage of, as well as quite a number. I want to thank you, and we'll be signing off at this point. Everybody stay healthy and have a great evening. Thanks again, Ange.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.